Friends, if you want to watch super hit movie Terminator 2 Judgment Day in English, then you must like this video. If you are visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. West Films friends, in today's video, the movie we are going to talk about is called Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I am also going to give you all the information on which platform or on which satellite channel you will get to watch this movie. This video is produced by West Films. We will talk about what this movie is and where you can watch it, all the interesting facts about this movie in today's video. I'm going to tell you apart from this. We will discuss about the facts of this film's storyline, star-cast actors' performance in the film, and which character has played which role. We will also talk about the story of this film, and I will give you a small review of the story. Off this film, also we will talk in detail about the technical department, music department, pre-production filming, post-production budget, box office collection of this film. That's why I request you friends to watch this video till the end, so I'll start the video. Terminator 2 Judgment Day is a 1991 American science fiction action film directed by James Cameron, who co-wrote the script with William Wisher. Starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, and Robert Patrick, it is the sequel to The Terminator, 1984, and is the second installment in the Terminator franchise. In the film, the malevolent artificial intelligence Skynet sends a Terminator, a highly advanced killing machine, back in time to 1995 to kill the future leader of the human resistance, John Connor, when he is a child. The Resistance sends back a less advanced, reprogrammed Terminator to protect Connor and ensure the future of humanity. The Terminator was considered a significant success, enhancing Schwarzenegger's and Cameron's careers, but work on a sequel stalled because of animosity between the pair and Hemdale Film Corporation, which partially owned the film's rights. In 1990, Schwarzenegger and Cameron persuaded Carolco Pictures to purchase the rights from the Terminator producer Gail Ann Hurd and Hemdale, which was financially struggling. A release date was set for the following year, leaving Cameron and Wisher 7 weeks to write the script. Principal photography lasted from October 1990 to March 1991, taking place in and around Los Angeles on an estimated $94 to $102 million budget, making it the most expensive film made at the time. The advanced visual effects by Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, which include the first use of a computer-generated main character in a blockbuster film, resulted in a schedule overrun. Theatrical prints were not delivered to theaters until the night before the picture's release on July 3, 1991. Terminator 2 was a critical and commercial success, grossing $520.9 million at the box office to become the highest-grossing film of 1991 worldwide and the third highest-grossing film of its time. The film won several accolades, including Saturn, BAFTA, and Academy Awards. Terminator 2 merchandise includes video games, comic books, novels, and T2 3D, Battle Across Time, a live-action attraction. Terminator 2 is considered one of the best science fiction, action, and sequel films ever made. It is also seen as a major influence on visual effects in films, helping usher in the transition from practical effects to reliance on computer-generated imagery. The United States Library of Congress selected it for preservation in the National Film Registry in 2023. Although Cameron intended for Terminator 2 to be the end of the franchise, it was followed by a series of sequels, including Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines 2003, Terminator Salvation 2009, Terminator Genesis 2015, and Terminator Dark Fate 2019, as well as a 2008 television series. Plot: in 2029, Earth has been ravaged by the war between the malevolent artificial intelligence Skynet and the human resistance. Skynet sends the T-1000s, an advanced, shape-shifting prototype Terminator made of virtually indestructible liquid metal, back in time to kill resistance leader John Connor when he is a child. To protect John, the Resistance sends back a reprogrammed T-800 Terminator, a less advanced metal endoskeleton covered in living tissue. In 1995, Los Angeles, John's mother Sarah is incarcerated in Pescadero State Hospital for her violent efforts to prevent Judgment Day, the prophesied events of August 29, 1997, when Skynet will gain sentience and, in response to its creator's attempts to deactivate it, incite a nuclear holocaust. John, living with foster parents, also considers Sarah delusional and resents her efforts to prepare him for his future role. The T-1000 locates John in a shopping mall, but the T-800 intervenes, coming to John's aid and enabling his escape. John calls to warn his foster parents, but the T-800 deduces that the T-1000 has already killed them. Realizing the T-800 is programmed to obey him, John forbids it to kill people and orders it to save Sarah from the T-1000. The T-800 and John intercept Sarah as she is making an escape attempt, but Sarah flees in horror upon seeing that the T-800 looks identical to the Terminator sent to kill her in 1984. John and the T-800 persuade her to join them, and they escape the pursuing T-1000. Although distrustful of the T-800, Sarah uses its knowledge of the future to learn that a revolutionary microprocessor, being developed by Cyberdyne engineer Miles Dyson, will be crucial to Skynet's creation. Over the course of their journey, Sarah sees the T-800 serving as a friend and father figure to John, who teaches it catchphrases and hand signs while encouraging it to become more human-like. Sarah plans to escape to Mexico with John, but a nightmare about Judgment Day convinces her to kill Dyson. She attacks Dyson in his home, but realizes she cannot bring herself to kill a person and relents. John arrives and reconciles with Sarah, while the T-800 convinces Dyson of the future consequences of his work. Dyson reveals that his research has been reverse engineered from the CPU and severed arm of the 1984 Terminator. Believing that his work must be destroyed, Dyson helps Sarah, John, and the T-800 break into Cyberdyne, retrieve the CPU and the arm, and set explosives to destroy the lab. The police assault the building and fatally shoot Dyson, but he detonates the explosives as he dies. The T-1000 pursues the surviving trio, cornering them in a steel mill. Sarah and John split up to escape, while the T-1000 mangles the T-800 and briefly deactivates it by destroying its power source. The T-1000 assumes Sarah's appearance and voice to lure out John, but Sarah intervenes and, along with the reactivated T-800, pushes it into a vat of molten steel, where it disintegrates. John also throws the 1984 Terminator's arm and CPU into the vat. The T-800 explains that it must also be destroyed to prevent it from serving as a foundation for Skynet. Despite John's tearful protests, the T-800 persuades him that its destruction is the only way to protect their future. Sarah, having come to respect the T-800, shakes its hand and lowers it into the vat. The T-800 gives John a thumbs up as it is incinerated. As Sarah drives down a highway with John, she reflects on her renewed hope for an unknown future, musing that if the T-800 could learn the value of life, so can humanity. Cast Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator, a reprogrammed Model 101 Series 800 T-800 Terminator that is composed of human tissue over a metal endoskeleton. Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, a self-trained soldier who is dedicated to preventing the rise of Skynet. Edward Furlong as John Connor, Sarah's son who is destined to lead the human resistance in opposition to Skynet. Robert Patrick as T-1000, an advanced shape-shifting prototype Terminator composed of liquid metal. Earl Bowen as Dr. Peter Silberman, Sarah's doctor at Pescadero State Hospital. Joe Morton as Miles Bennett Dyson, Director of Special Projects at Cyberdyne Systems Corporation. The film's cast also includes Jeanette Goldstein and Xander Berkeley as John's foster parents, Janelle and Todd Voigt, Castulo Guerra as Sarah's friend Enrique Salceda, S. Apatha Merkerson and Devon Nixon as Dyson's wife Teresa and son Danny, and Danny Cooksey as John's friend Tim. Hamilton's twin sister Leslie Hamilton Guerin appears as the T-1000 impersonating Sarah when Hamilton is also on screen. Twins Don and Dan Stanton portray a guard at Pescadero State Hospital and the T-1000 imitating him. Other cast members include Ken Gibble as an abusive orderly, Robert Winley, Ron Young, Charles Robert Brown, and Pete Shrum as men who confront the T-800 in a biker bar, Abdul Salam El Razak as Gibbons, a Cyberdyne guard, and Dean Norris as the SWAT team leader. Michael Edwards portrays the John Connor of 2029, and Hamilton's infant son Dalton Abbott portrays John in a dream sequence. Co-writer William Wisher cameos as a man photographing the T-800 in the mall, and Michael Biehn reprises his role as resistance soldier Kyle Reese in scenes that were removed from the theatrical release. Production. Development. The Terminator had been a surprise hit, earning $78.4 million against its $6.4 million budget, confirming Schwarzenegger's status as a lead actor and establishing James Cameron as a mainstream director. Schwarzenegger expressed interest in a sequel, saying, "I always felt we should continue the story. I told Cameron that right after we finished the first film." Cameron said Schwarzenegger had always been more enthusiastic about a sequel than he was, because Cameron considered the original a complete story. Discussions to make a sequel stalled until 1989, in part owing to Cameron's work on other films such as Aliens, 1986, and The Abyss, 1989, but also because of a dispute with rights holder Hemdale Film Corporation. Hemdale co-founder John Daly, against Cameron's wishes, had attempted to alter the ending of The Terminator, nearly resulting in a physical confrontation. A sequel could not be made without Hemdale's approval, as Cameron had surrendered 50% of his rights to the company to get The Terminator made. Cameron had also sold half of the remaining stake to his ex-wife Gail Ann Hurd, producer and co-writer on the first film, for $1 following their 1989 divorce. By 1990, Hemdale was being sued by Cameron, Schwarzenegger, Hurd, and special effects artist Stan Winston for unpaid profits from The Terminator. Schwarzenegger, aware Hemdale was experiencing financial difficulties, convinced Carolco Pictures to purchase the film rights to The Terminator. Having worked with owner Mario Kassar, described the rights acquisition as the most difficult deal Carolco ever conducted. He accepted a $10 million offer for Hemdale's share, considering it a sum fabricated to ward him off, and paid Hurd $5 million for her share. Prior to development, the total cost of the acquisition rose to $17 million after factoring in incidental costs. Kassar told Cameron that in order to recoup his investment, the film would proceed with or without him, and offered Cameron $6 million to be involved and write the script. The film would become a collaboration between several production studios: Carolco, Le Studio Canal Plus, Cameron's Lightstorm Entertainment, and Hurd's Pacific Western Productions. The studio also had an existing U.S. distribution deal with TriStar Pictures, which stipulated that the film be ready for release by May 27, 1991, Memorial Day. Writing. With a scheduled release date, Cameron had 6 to 7 weeks to write the sequel. He approached his frequent collaborator and the Terminator co-writer William Wisher in March 1990. They spent 2 weeks developing a film treatment based on Cameron's vision to form a relationship between John Connor and the T-800, a concept Wisher believed was a joke. Their treatment diverged from the science fiction slasher theme of the original, focusing on the unconventional family bond formed between Sarah, John, and the T-800. Cameron said this relationship is the heart of the movie, comparing it to the Tin Man receiving a heart in The Wizard of Oz, 1939. Cameron's concept featured Skynet and the Resistance each sending a T-800, both played by Schwarzenegger, into the past, one to kill John and the other to protect him. Wisher believed a fight between two identical Terminators would be boring. The pair briefly considered a larger Super Terminator, but found it uninteresting and adopted an early idea Cameron had for the Terminator: a liquid metal Terminator resembling an average-sized human in contrast to Schwarzenegger's large frame. The first half of their concept concluded with the destruction of Skynet's T-800, forcing it to use the T-1000, its ultimate weapon. Although he once considered removing the T-1000 altogether, Cameron solidified it as the only antagonist. Cameron and Wisher had the T-1000 take on the appearance of a police officer, allowing it to operate with less suspicion. Wisher found it challenging to depict the T-800 as good without making it non-threatening at the same time. The pair decided to give it the ability to learn and develop emotions, becoming more human over time. They kept the T-800's dialogue brief, relying on the audience to infer a lot of meaning through small bites. Its catchphrase, "Hasta la vista, baby," was something Wisher and Cameron said after their telephone calls. Wisher developed the first half of the treatment at Cameron's home over the course of 4 weeks, while Cameron worked on the latter half. Many pages were removed, including a convoluted subplot about Dyson and a massacre of a camp of survivalists helping Sarah. Cameron, who did not consider the budget while writing, had to cut some elaborate scenes, including a 9-minute opening that showed a time travel machine being used in 2029. Wisher and Cameron also frequently conferred with special effects studio Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, to determine which ideas were achievable. Cameron and Wisher analyzed the first film to help envision each character's development and evolution. Cameron believed Sarah's knowledge of the future would isolate her, forcing her to associate with survivalists and become a self-sufficient commando. She was written to have become an emotionally cold and distant character comparable to a Terminator, especially when deciding to go after Dyson. Instead of the story beginning with Sarah, John is placed with a foster family to increase tension. John's character was inspired by the 1985 Sting song Russians, with Cameron recalling, "I remember sitting there once, high on E. I was struck by the lyrics, 'I hope the Russians love their children too.' And I thought, the idea of a nuclear war is just so antithetical to life itself." That's where John came from. They spent 3 days refining the script before flying to Cannes, where Terminator 2 was announced in early May 1990. Schwarzenegger initially struggled with portions of the script, once asking, "What is polyalloy?" He also expressed concern about his character's non-lethal depiction, which conflicted with his action hero persona and portrayal of the character in The Terminator. Cameron explained he wanted to defy audience expectations. Schwarzenegger requested, "Just make me cool." Casting Schwarzenegger became interested in reprising his role after finding the character more complex and sympathetic than in the previous film. To accurately portray a fearless and emotionless machine, he trained extensively with stunt coordinator Joel Kramer to remain unaffected by fire and explosions around him. Schwarzenegger earned $12 to $15 million for his involvement. Carolco had been blamed for the increase in exorbitant salaries paid to actors, having paid Schwarzenegger around $11 million for Total Recall, 1990. They justified the expense as the value of their lead's wide appeal in markets outside the U.S. To lessen the immediate financial burden, Carolco paid most of Schwarzenegger's salary with a financed $12.75 million Gulfstream III jet. Cameron refused to recast Hamilton's role, but developed plans to work around her absence if she chose not to return. Negotiations were protracted, but concluded promptly after Cameron informed Carolco the script could not be finished until he knew if Hamilton would be involved. Hamilton received roughly $1 million, which she described as quite a bit more than her earnings for The Terminator, but expressed disappointment at the pay disparity between her and Schwarzenegger. Hamilton requested that Sarah exhibit a crazy demeanor, explaining that after years of living with the impending doom of humanity, she believed Sarah would have transformed into an untamed entity, a warrior combined with a psychologically unstable woman. She continued, "The T-800 is a better human than I am, and I'm a better Terminator than he is." Cameron considered giving the character a facial scar, but determined that applying it daily would be difficult. Hamilton undertook extensive preparation for her role, working with a personal trainer for 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, and maintaining a strict low-fat diet, losing about 12 pounds, 5.4 kilograms of body weight. She also received judo and military training from former Israeli commando Uziel Gal. Between training, filming, and spending time with her infant son Dalton, Hamilton averaged only 4 hours of sleep per day. She described her experience as sheer hell, but enjoyed showing off her new physique. Hamilton's twin sister Leslie was also cast in scenes where two versions of Sarah appear on screen simultaneously. Patrick, who was living in his car, was one of several actors in their late 20s considered for the T-1000 role. Cameron wanted a lithe actor resembling a newly recruited police officer to contrast with Schwarzenegger. According to Cameron, if the T-800 series is a kind of human panzer tank, then the T-1000 series had to be a Porsche. Casting director Mally Finn believed Patrick had the intense presence they wanted. Patrick auditioned by acting like an emotionless hunter and later participated in a screen test to judge the way lighting worked with his skin and eyes. For his character, he drew inspiration from Schwarzenegger's performance in The Terminator and observed hunting creatures, reptiles, insects, cats, and sharks. Patrick's facial expressions were based on those of an eagle, keeping his head tilted down to imply constant forward movement. He also employed a mixture of military posture with martial arts to express a fluid motion that differed from the T-800's rigid movements. The role demanded that Patrick be lean and fast, requiring peak physical shape. He learned to sprint without displaying heavy breathing and exhaustion, and received specialized training from Gal. Weapons Master Harry Liu taught Patrick to operate and reload weapons, such as the T-1000's Beretta 92FS, without looking, and eventually without blinking 56. Singer Billy Idol was originally cast for the role before seriously injuring his leg in a motorcycle crash. In a 2021 retrospective, Cameron said Idol singer Blackie Lawless of the rock band WASP was also considered but deemed too tall. Furlong, among hundreds of other prospects, secured the role of young John Connor at his last audition. Cameron believed that early candidates for the role were either overexposed in other media or came from advertisement backgrounds, which trained them to be happy and perky. Furlong had no acting experience and was discovered by Finn at the Boys and Girls Club in Pasadena. Cameron described Furlong as having a surliness, an intelligence, just a question of pulling it out. He was required to take acting lessons, learn Spanish, and be able to ride a motorcycle and repair guns. Joe Morton believed his casting as Miles Dyson had to do with Cameron wanting a minority character to be integral to the changing of the world. Morton avoided interacting with the cast so that their on-screen relationships would seem believably distant. The role of Dyson was reduced after the preferred casting choice, Denzel Washington, declined it because the role mainly required him to act scared. Filming. The planned 3 months of pre-production was reduced to meet the release schedule, leaving Cameron without the time he wanted to prepare all aspects before filming began. Over a week, he spent several hours each day choreographing vehicle scenes with toy cars and trucks, filming the results, and printing the footage for storyboard artists. There was no time to properly test practical effects before filming, so if effects did not work, the filmmakers had to work around them. Principal photography began on October 8 to 9, 1990, with a $60 million budget. Scenes were filmed out of sequence to prioritize those requiring extensive visual effects. Schwarzenegger found this difficult because he was meant to convey subtle signs of the T-800's progressive humanity and was unsure what was fitting for each scene. Cinematographer Adam Greenberg, who also worked on The Terminator, described the greater scope of the sequel as the most daunting prospect. Where he had been able to shout instructions to his crew on the original film, he used one of 187 walkie-talkies to conduct efforts over an expansive area. The production was arduous, in part because of Cameron, who was known for his short temper and uncompromising dictatorial manner. The crew made T-shirts bearing the slogan, "You can't scare me, I work for Jim Cameron." Schwarzenegger described him as a supportive but demanding taskmaster with a fanaticism for physical and visual detail. Even so, by the 101st day of filming, Schwarzenegger and Hamilton were frustrated by the high number of takes Cameron performed, spending 5 days just on close-ups of Hamilton in the Dyson home. To stay on schedule, Cameron worked through Christmas and persuaded Schwarzenegger to cancel a visit to American troops in Saudi Arabia with U.S. President George H.W. Bush to film his scenes. The production was filmed in many locations in and around Los Angeles. The now destroyed Corral Bar in Sylmar is where the T-800 confronts a group of bikers. Location manager Jim Morris chose Corral because it was raised above ground, allowing the scene to take place over different levels. The 1991 police beating of Rodney King took place at the same location a week after filming, being captured on the same videotape a spectator used to capture the filming of the biker bar scenes. On one occasion, a woman who was oblivious to ongoing filming walked into the bar. When she asked Schwarzenegger, who was wearing only a pair of shorts, what was going on, he replied, "It's male stripper night." Executives suggested cutting the scene to save money, but Cameron and Schwarzenegger refused. The T-1000's arrival in 1995 was filmed at the 6th Street Viaduct, and John's hacking of an ATM was filmed at a bank in Van Nuys. His foster parents' residence is in the Canoga Park neighborhood, deliberately chosen for its generic appearance. The Terminator's confrontation with John takes place inside Santa Monica Place Mall, although exterior shots were captured at Northridge Fashion Center because there was less traffic. In the subsequent scene, Patrick's training allowed him to outrun John on his dirt bike, so the bike's maximum speed was increased. The T-1000 continues its pursuit using a truck in a scene filmed at the Bull Creek Spillway. Other locations include the Lakeview Terrace Hospital, standing in as Pescadero State Hospital, and the Peterson Automotive Museum was used as its garage. In a 2012 interview, Hamilton said she suffered permanent partial hearing loss after not wearing earplugs during the hospital elevator scene where the T-800 fires a gun, as well as shell shock from months of exposure to violence, loud noise, and gunfire. Elysian Park serves as the site of Sarah's apocalyptic dream, and scenes at the Dyson home were captured at a private property in Malibu. The Cyberdyne building's destruction was filmed at an abandoned office in San Jose, scheduled for demolition. To bring a heightened sense of authenticity, real members of the Los Angeles Police Department's SWAT division were featured in the scene, although Cameron embellished their tactics to be visually interesting. In a spontaneous decision during Morton's death scene, Cameron opted to detonate nearby glass to examine its visual impact. The final highway chase was filmed along the Terminal Island Freeway near Long Beach, of which a 2.5-mile, 4.0-kilometer stretch was closed to traffic every night for 2 weeks. Scenes set during the future war of 2029 were filmed in the rubble of an abandoned steel mill in Oxnard, California, in a 1/2 square mile, 1.3 square kilometer space that was enhanced with burned bicycles and cars from a 1989 fire at the Universal Studios lot. Terminator 2's ending was filmed in the closed Kaiser Steel Mill in Fontana, which Greenberg made appear operational mainly through lighting techniques. Despite appearing to be actively smelting steel, the mill was frigid and dangerous because of the moving machinery and high catwalks. The T-800's thumbs up during its death was added during filming. Hamilton considered it too sentimental. 6 months of filming concluded on March 28, 1991, about 3 weeks behind schedule. Post-production. Terminator 2 was edited by Conrad Buff IV, Richard A. Harris, and Mark Goldblatt, who said although there was more time to edit than on the Terminator, it was still relatively small given the greater scope of the sequel. They described the complexity of scenes, such as the final battle between the Terminators, which required a seamless combination of live action, practical effect shots, and CGI. After having to rush editing at the end of The Abyss, Cameron limited filming on Terminator 2 to 5 days a week, so he could help edit the film on weekends from the start of filming. Several scenes were deleted, in part to reduce its running time. These include Kyle Reese appearing to Sarah in a dream and encouraging her to continue fighting. Sarah being beaten in the hospital, the T-1000 killing John's dog, a scene the animal-loving Patrick was not a fan of. John teaching the T-800 to smile and discussing whether it fears death, the T-1000 malfunctioning after being frozen in the steel mill, and additional scenes with Dyson's family. Schwarzenegger unsuccessfully rallied to retain his favorite scene, in which John and Sarah modify the T-800 CPU, allowing it to learn and evolve, and Sarah attempts to destroy the CPU, but John defends the T-800. The scene was replaced with dialogue indicating that the T-800 already possesses the ability to learn. The scripted ending depicted an alternative 2029 that was filmed at the Los Angeles Arboretum in Arcadia, in which an aged Sarah narrates how Skynet was never created while John, now a U.S. Senator, plays with his daughter in a Washington, D.C. playground. To make the film more evocative and memorable, Cameron changed this scene to one in which the characters look out at the road ahead. The production ran until about 2 days before the film's theatrical release. Delays were caused mainly by the rendering of shots at Consolidated Film Industries, the most difficult of which was the T-1000's death. Co-producer Stephanie Austin said the production crew worked 24-hour shifts and slept on site. The 137-minute-long release print was delivered to theaters the night before its release. There were 2 private pre-release screenings, one for family, friends, and crew at Skywalker Ranch, and another in Los Angeles for studio executives. Austin said, "People were stamping their feet and clapping for 10 or 15 minutes, at which point the crew knew they had succeeded." During test screenings, the ending was well received and was described as a touching favorite scene. The minimum estimated cost to produce Terminator 2 had been $60 million, dwarfing the budget of the first film. Cameron and Schwarzenegger said the final budget, excluding marketing, was about $70 million, and the cost of making the film was about $51 million. According to Carolco executives Peter Hoffman and Roger Smith, the film cost $75 million before marketing, saying Terminator 2 was only modestly over budget. Including marketing and other costs, the film's total budget is reported to have been between $94 million and $102 million. Kasser said he had secured 110% of the budget from advances and guarantees of $91 million, including North American Television, $7 million, and home video, $10 million rights, and $61 million from theatrical, home video, and television rights outside the U.S. The distribution deal with TriStar Pictures earned it a set percentage of the budget, an estimated $4 million. News sources labeled Terminator 2 the most expensive independent film ever and predicted it would bankrupt Carolco. Visual effects and design. Main article, Visual Effects of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. A 10-month schedule and about $15 to $17 million of Terminator 2's budget was allocated just for special effects, including $5 million for the T-1000 alone and a further $1 million for stunts, at the time one of the largest ever stunt budgets. 4 main companies were involved in creating the 150 visual effects. ILM Special Effects Supervisor Dennis Murin managed the computer-generated imagery, CGI effects, Stan Winston Studio the prosthetics and animatronics. Fantasy 2 Film Effects developed miniatures and optical effects, and Forward Productions was responsible for creating a nuclear explosion effect. Pacific Data Images and Video Image provided additional visual effects, the former doing digital wire removal and the latter creating the Thermovision POV. The cost and time involved in producing CGI meant that the effect was used sparingly, appearing in 42 to 43 shots alongside 50 to 60 practical effects. Portraying the T-1000 was a risky endeavor, as CGI was in its infancy, and there was no backup plan in place if the CGI did not work as intended or could not be composited effectively with Winston's practical effects. The computer systems needed to animate and render the T-1000 CGI cost thousands of dollars alone, but creating the character also relied on a variety of practical appliances, visual illusions, and filming techniques. A team of up to 35 at ILM was required for the 5 minutes of screen time the T-1000's effects appear, and the process was so complex that rendering 15 seconds of footage took up to 10 days. Music. See also Terminator 2 Judgment Day score and You Could Be Mine. Brad Fiedel, Escape from the Hospital. Duration, 28 seconds 28. The T-1000 theme by Fiedel. Problems playing this file? See Media Help. The Terminator composer Brad Fiedel returned for the sequel, working in his garage in Studio City, Los Angeles. Film industry professionals regarded his return with concern and skepticism as they believed his style would not suit the film. Fidel quickly realized he would not receive the finished footage until late in the production after most effects were completed, which made it difficult to commit to decisions such as use of an orchestra because, unlike ambient music, the score had to accompany the on-screen action. Fidel and Cameron wanted the musical tone to be warmer due to its focus on a nobler Terminator and young John. Fidel experimented with sounds and shared them with Cameron for feedback. While the Terminator score had mainly used oscillators and synthesizers, Fidel recorded real instruments and modified their sounds. He developed a library of sounds for characters such as the T-1000, whose theme was created by sampling brass instrument players warming up and improvising. Fidel said to the players, "You're an insane asylum. You're a bedlam of instruments." He slowed down the resulting sample and lowered the pitch, describing it as artificial intelligent monks chanting. Cameron considered the atonal sound too avant-garde, to which Fidel replied, "You're creating something that people have never seen before, and the score ought to sound like something people have never heard before to support that." TriStar asked Schwarzenegger to arrange a tie-in music video and theme song for the film. He chose to work with rock band Guns N' Roses because they were popular and there was a rose in the movie and bloody guns. The band offered the use of You Could Be Mine, the debut single from their album Use Your Illusion 2, 1991. The music video, featuring Schwarzenegger as the T-800 pursuing the band, was directed by Stan Winston, Andrew Morahan, and Jeffrey Abelson. Patrick unsuccessfully lobbied to use Head Like a Hole by 9 Inch Nails as the tie-in song, in part because his brother Richard Patrick was their tour guitarist. Wisher suggested using Bad to the Bone by George Thorogood and the Destroyers as the T-800 puts on the biker clothes. Although Cameron did not like the idea, Wisher said he later found that Cameron had used the song but had forgotten it was his idea. Guitars, Cadillacs by Dwight Yoakam also features in Terminator 2. Release, context, see also 1991 in film. The summer theatrical season, spanning from mid-May to early September, was expected to witness strong competition among studios. 55 films were slated for release, compared with 37 in 1990. Release dates underwent frequent changes as studios aimed to evade direct competition and optimize their films' chances of success to compensate for the 20% increase in film production costs since 1990. This increase was partly attributed to hefty salaries demanded by stars who also claimed a portion of the film's profits. Moreover, revenues from box office receipts, video sales, and television network deals were on the decline. Films scheduled for release included City Slickers, The Naked Gun 2.5, The Smell of Fear, Only the Lonely, Hudson Hawk, The Rocketeer, What About Bob, and Point Break. Terminator 2 was among the films expected to do well, along with Backdraft, Dying Young, and the year's predicted top film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. It was also seen as having strong international appeal. An unnamed studio executive said audiences were seeking escapist entertainment such as comedy or action and avoiding films about less positive subject matter. Marketing and promotion. Schwarzenegger was involved in Terminator 2's marketing and merchandising campaign, which was estimated to be worth at least $20 million. By 1991, advertising for Terminator 2 was ubiquitous, with high audience recognition. Despite its U.S. R rating, which restricted the film to audiences aged 17 and over unless accompanied by an adult, merchandise was mainly aimed at children. TriStar contributed about $20 million for marketing, which included a $150,000 teaser trailer that was directed by Winston and depicts the construction of a T-800. Trailers ran for 6 months before the film's release. TriStar incentivized cinema staff to play it frequently by offering chances to win Terminator 2 branded goods and tickets to the premiere. Fast food restaurants and soft drink manufacturers such as Subway and Pepsi also offered Terminator 2 themed foodstuffs and drinks alongside promotional posters. The premiere took place on July 1, 1991 at the Cineplex Odeon in Century City, Los Angeles. According to Fidel, it was treated as a major event, unlike the premiere of The Terminator, during which the audience was skeptical or laughed at the wrong times. Celebrities in attendance included Whoopi Goldberg, Timothy Dalton, James Caan, Billy Crystal, Dudley Moore, Sandra Locke, Brian De Palma, Richard Lewis, Lou Ferrigno, Debbie Allen, Sandra Bernhard, Maria Shriver, Nicolas Cage, Sylvester Stallone, Sharon Stone, Michael Douglas, and Furlong's date Soleil Moon Frye. Box office? Terminator 2 Judgment Day opened in the United States and Canada on July 3rd, leading into the Independence Day holiday weekend. It had the highest-grossing Wednesday opening with $11.8 million. Between Friday and Sunday, the film grossed $31.8 million from 2,274 theaters, an average of $13,969 per theater, making it the #1 film of the weekend ahead of The Naked Gun 2.5, $11.6 million. In its second weekend, and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, $10.3 million in its fourth. Over the 5-day holiday weekend, Wednesday to Sunday, Terminator 2 grossed $52.3 million, becoming the second highest opening 5-day total ever behind Batman's $57 million in 1989. It set a record opening for an R-rated film and for an Independence Day weekend. The opening week audience was evenly split between adults, teenagers, and children, about 25 or 30% of whom were women, although TriStar said the figure was higher. The film benefited from repeat viewings by young audience members. One theater chain executive said, "Nothing since Batman has created the frenzy for tickets we saw this weekend with Terminator. At virtually all our locations, we are selling out. The word-of-mouth buzz out there is just phenomenal." Industry professional Lawrence Kasanoff said it was an open secret that despite the R rating, children were seeing the film, remarking, "When T2 opened, I saw kids skateboard up to the ticket window." It retained the #1 position in its second weekend, grossing $20.7 million, ahead of the debuts of 101 Dalmatians, $10.3 million, and Boys in the Hood, $10 million, and in its third weekend with $14.9 million, ahead of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, $10.2 million, and 101 Dalmatians, $7.8 million. Terminator 2 Judgment Day fell to #2 in its fifth weekend, grossing $8.6 million against the debut of the comedy Hot Shots, $10.8 million. It remained in the top 5 highest-grossing films for 12 consecutive weeks and the top 10 highest-grossing films for 15 weeks. In total, Terminator 2 Judgment Day spent about 26 weeks in theaters in a total of 2,495 cinemas and grossed $204.8 million, making it the highest-grossing film of the year, ahead of Robin Hood. Prince of Thieves, $165 million, Beauty and the Beast, $145 million, and The Silence of the Lambs, $130 million. This also made it the 13th highest-grossing film of its time, behind Back to the Future 1985 and the highest-grossing R-rated film. The Los Angeles Times estimated after the theater and distributor cuts, the box office returns to Carolco would be well over 20% of the film's cost. Outside the US and Canada, Terminator 2 Judgment Day set numerous box office records. In the United Kingdom, it had a record 3-day opening weekend of $4.4 million and a 1-week record of $7.8 million and went on to gross at least $30 million. In France, it grossed a record $9.5 million in its opening week, the biggest opening since Rocky IV, and $16 million in 2 weeks. In Germany, it grossed a record $8 million in 5 days and had a record Australian opening weekend of $1.9 million. In Thailand, it was the highest-grossing Western Hemisphere film ever with a gross of $1.2 million. The film also performed well in Brazil and grossed at least $51 million in Japan. Internationally, the film grossed about $312.1 million, making it the first film to gross over $300 million outside of the US and Canada. Terminator 2 Judgment Day is estimated to have grossed a worldwide total of $519 to $520.9 million, making it the year's highest-grossing film and the third highest-grossing film ever, behind 1977's Star Wars, $530 million, and 1982's E.T. the Extraterrestrial, $619 million. Reception. Critical response. Terminator 2 Judgment Day was released to general acclaim. Many reviews focused on the state-of-the-art physical, special, and makeup effects, which were roundly praised as revolutionary and spectacular, particularly those calling the T-1000 a technological wonder. Several publications wrote that Cameron's ability to realize cinematic action blockbusters was unmatched. Janet Maslin said that at his best, despite occasional lapses into melodrama, Cameron's work is akin to that of director Stanley Kubrick. Both Maslin and the Austin Chronicle commented on the kindness and compassion in the film. The Austin Chronicle contrasted it to the lack of a moral message in the Terminator, and Travers described it as a visionary parable. But they, alongside others, criticized Terminator 2's muddled message about protecting the value of human life and peace by using extreme violence to prevent the use of nuclear weapons, war and technological reliance. Reviewers generally agreed the narrative early in the film is stronger than the one near the end. Owen Gleiberman said the first hour has a genuine emotional pull, and according to Roger Ebert, the initial concept of a boy finding a father figure in a Terminator that is learning to be human is intriguing, but Gleiberman said the narrative weakens once Hamilton's character joins the group. Travers and Corliss wrote it stumbles after hours of relentless action and a conventional climax. Despite this observation, Gleiberman praised the final battle between the T-1000 and the protagonists. Empire's Review and Terrence Rafferty found the film's narrative less satisfying and idea-driven than that of the Terminator. Gleiberman said despite it being an effective and witty thriller, Terminator 2, Judgment Day comes across as an expensive B-movie when compared with visionary spectacles such as the Mad Max series and RoboCop 1987. Kenneth Turan said Terminator 2's action scenes succeed without the extreme gore and violence of RoboCop. Ebert and Maslin, among others, appreciated the twist on Schwarzenegger's public action hero persona by making him a hero who does not kill his enemies. David Anson and Gleiberman found humor in the T-800's non-lethal methods and efforts to become more human-like. Maslin and Henson agreed that, as in the Terminator, Schwarzenegger's role is perfect for his acting abilities. Henson said Schwarzenegger portrayed more humanity as a machine than he did when portraying normal people. In contrast, Empire suggested that the change was a concession to Schwarzenegger's young fans, and Peter Travers chose the T-800's death as a cornball scene that is out of place for the actor in film. Several reviewers praised the T-1000 character for the combination of Patrick's chilling, expressionless performance and the advanced special effects, which create an implacable, show-stopping villain. Empire called the character one of the great monsters of the cinema. Gleiberman said the character's absence from much of the film's second act is to the film's detriment, and Henson wrote that the T-1000 lacks any soul, and thus a way for the audience to identify with it. Critics generally agreed. Hamilton portrays a fierce female hero with an impressive physique that lets her outshine another action hero, Sigourney Weaver's Ellen Ripley in Cameron's Aliens, 1986. Other publications found Sarah Connor's narrations about peace to be heavy-handed, overused, and unintentionally amusing. Furlong was praised for giving a natural performance at a young age, and Henson wrote that despite limited screen time, Morton made an impression. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A+ on a scale of A+ to F. Accolades. At the 1992 Saturn Awards, Terminator 2: Judgment Day received awards for Best Science Fiction Film, Best Director, James Cameron, Best Actress, Linda Hamilton, Best Performance by a Younger Actor, Edward Furlong, and Best Special Effects, as well as nomination for Best Actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger. It also won Favorite Motion Picture at the 18th People's Choice Awards. For the 45th British Academy Film Awards, Terminator 2 received awards for Best Sound, Lee Orloff, Tom Johnson, Gary Rydstrom, Gary Summers, and Best Special Visual Effects, Stan Winston, Dennis Muren, Gene Warren Jr., Robert Skotak, as well as a nomination for Best Production Design, Joseph Nimek III. The 64th Academy Awards earned Terminator 2 4 awards: Best Makeup, Winston and Jeff Dawn; Best Sound, Orloff, Johnson, Rydstrom, and Summers; Best Sound Effects Editing, Rydstrom and Gloria S. Borders; and Best Visual Effects, Muren, Winston, Warren Jr., and Skotak, as well as nominations for Best Cinematography, Adam Greenberg, and Best Film Editing, Conrad Buff IV, Mark Goldblatt, and Richard A. Harris. It was the first film to win an Academy Award when its predecessor had not been nominated. It received 6 awards at the 1992 MTV Movie Awards, including Best Movie, Best Action Sequence, LA Freeway Scene, Best Breakthrough Performance, Furlong, Best Female Performance, Hamilton, Best Male Performance, Schwarzenegger, and nominations for Best Song from a Movie, You Could Be Mine, Best Villain, Robert Patrick, and Most Desirable Female, Hamilton, as well as a Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation, Cameron and William Wisher Jr. Post-release. Aftermath. Terminator 2, Judgment Day, launched the careers or raised the profiles of its principal actors. According to industry professionals, Schwarzenegger became the top international star, ahead of actors such as Mel Gibson and Tom Cruise. It also marked the start of a lasting friendship between Schwarzenegger and Cameron, who formed a midlife crisis motorcycle club and reunited for the action film True Lies, 1994. Cameron and Hamilton began a romantic relationship in 1991, married in 1997, and later divorced. In 1992, Cameron was given a 5-year, $500 million contract by 20th Century Fox to produce 12 films. Furlong became a highly sought-after actor, and Patrick found dealing with his newfound recognition difficult as people asked him to impersonate the T-1000. Despite the film's success, Carolco reported 1991 losses of $265 million, which was caused by the financial problems of its other films and subsidiaries. Support from investors failed to prevent the studio from filing for bankruptcy in 1995, and its assets, including Terminator 2, were sold to Canal Plus for $58 million. Home media. On December 11, 1991, Terminator 2 Judgment Day was released on VHS and Laserdisc. It was a popular rental in the US and Canada, with a record 714,000 copies shipped to retailers, and it became the best-selling rental by mid-January 1992. Varese Sarabande released Fiedel's score, which spent 6 weeks on the Billboard 200 record chart, peaking at number 70. The theme song, You Could Be Mine, peaked at number 29 on the U.S. Billboard 100 and performed well in the United Kingdom, Australia, Germany, Spain, and Canada. A special edition Laserdisc was released in 1993, featuring a 15-minute extended version of the film that restored deleted scenes, interviews with cast and crew, storyboards, designs, and unrestored deleted scenes. Cameron stated he did not use the label Director's Cut because he considered the theatrical releases to be definitive and the extended versions as opportunities to restore depth and character made omissible by theatrical running time. 79-184. The theatrical version was released on DVD in 1997. In 2000, an Ultimate Edition DVD was released containing the theatrical and special edition cuts, and a new extended cut containing a scene of the T-1000 inspecting John's bedroom and the alternate ending. Terminator 2 special effects coordinator Van Ling supervised the release. The Extreme Edition was released in 2003, featuring the theatrical and special edition cuts, a remastered 1080p image, Cameron's first commentary, and a documentary about the film's influence on special effects. Terminator 2 was released on Blu-ray in 2006, followed in 2009 by a Skynet edition that contains the theatrical and special edition cuts and commentaries with the cast and crew. This release includes a limited collector's set containing the Blu-ray, the Ultimate and Extreme editions on DVDs, a digital download version, all extant special features, and a 14-inch 360mm T800 skull bust. A 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray version that includes a standard Blu-ray and digital version was released in 2017. This release also offered a collector's option that includes one of 6,000 life-size replicas of a T800 skeleton forearm, each signed by Cameron and individually numbered, the soundtrack, the theatrical, special, extended, and 2017 3D remaster cuts, and Reprogramming the Terminator, a documentary that includes interviews with Schwarzenegger, Cameron, Furlong, and others. Other media: main articles, list of Terminator video games, list of Terminator comic books, and T2 3D Battle Across Time. Terminator 2 Judgment Day was marketed with numerous tie-in products, including toys, puppets, trading cards, jigsaw puzzles, clothing, a perfume named Hero, and a novelization by Randall Frakes that expands on the film's ending. In 1991, Marvel Comics adapted the film into a comic book, which was followed by expansions of the Terminator 2 narrative, including Malibu Comics' Cybernetic Dawn and Nuclear Twilight, 1995 to 1996, Dynamite Entertainment's Infinity and Revolution, 2007, and the T2 novel series by S.M. Sterling in the early 2000s. Several video game adaptations of Terminator 2 were published, including a pinball machine and an arcade game in 1991. The arcade game was popular enough to be ported to home consoles as T2, the arcade game. Multiple studios developed widely differing adaptations for home consoles, including Terminator 2 for Game Boy and Terminator 2 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES, 94. A later adaptation was developed for the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and a different game was published for home computers. Merchandise for Terminator 2 Judgment Day was estimated to have generated $400 million in sales by 1997. Another game, Terminator 2D No Fate, is scheduled for release in September 2025. In 1996, T2 3D Battle Across Time, a live-action attraction, was opened at Universal Studios Florida, and later at locations in Hollywood and Japan. The 20-minute attraction was co-written and directed by Cameron and cost $60 million to produce, including live-action stunts and a $24 million, 12-minute 3D film starring Schwarzenegger, Hamilton, Patrick, and Furlong as their in-world characters, making it the most expensive film per minute produced of its time. In it, Sarah and John attempt to stop Cyberdyne, which has developed Skynet. They are confronted by the T-1000 but saved by the T-800, which returns to 2029 with John to defeat Skynet and its latest creation, the T-1000. 3D Remaster. Main article, Terminator 2 3D Remaster. Cameron oversaw a year-long 3D remaster and subsequent theatrical re-release of Terminator 2 Judgment Day in August 2017. Cameron said, "If you've never seen it, this will be the version you want to see and remember." Cameron made visual modifications to the film to fix errors that had bothered him, including the addition of windshield glass to the T-1000's truck, which fell out during its stunt fall and reappears in later scenes, concealing the obvious use of stuntmen for Furlong and Schwarzenegger during the same scene, concealed more of Patrick's nudity during his introduction, and brightened the visuals. The 3D remaster's theatrical release was seen as a disappointment, earning about $562,000 in its debut across 386 theaters compared to the 3D re-release of Cameron's Titanic in 2012, which fetched $17 million. Themes and analysis.
Themes.
A central theme of Terminator 2 Judgment Day is the relationship between John Connor and the T-800, which serves as a surrogate for the father, Kyle Reese, he never knew. Cameron said, "Sure, there's going to be big, thunderous action sequences, but the heart of the movie is that relationship, comparing it to the Tin Man getting a heart in The Wizard of Oz." As with Cameron's earlier film Aliens, Terminator 2 focuses on compassion and parental figures, depicting the T-800 as a relentless protector and father figure to John against the equally relentless T-1000. The T-800 is designed to emulate humans for infiltration purposes. But as it grows and evolves, its emotions become real, and it learns from John to feel grief. The T-800 chooses to sacrifice its life to ensure the survival of everyone else. In 1991, essayist Robert Bly wrote that older men were not offering suitable role models for young men. And in Terminator 2, Sarah denounces the many men in her past who failed to be a father for John, except for the T-800. Once its role is complete, the T-800 leaves John for his own good after stating that it lacks the emotions John must rely on. While John teaches the T-800 about humanity, his biological mother Sarah has become less human because of her knowledge about the future. Cameron said, "She's a sad character, a tragic character. She believes that everyone she meets, talks to, or interacts with will be dead very soon." This theme of machine-like humans links with Cameron's and Wisher's choice to make the T-1000 appear as a police officer, because thematically they believed it represents humans who should have empathy for others becoming more machine-like and detached from their emotions. The SWAT team at Cyberdyne shoots Dyson, an African-American, without warning. Cinephilia described Dyson as the most human character in the film, an intelligent, optimistic family man who represents real-world encounters between police forces and people of color, in contrast to their encounter with the Caucasian T-800, during which they warn him before opening fire. Following her escape from the state hospital, Sarah appears to embrace John, but is actually checking him for injuries, foregoing any emotional attachment for the practicality of ensuring his survival and bringing about his destiny as a future leader. The T-800 is portrayed as a better parent than Sarah, offering him undivided attention while Sarah remains distant and focused on the future rather than the present. Philosophy professor Richard T. McClellan notes that Sarah's acceptance of the T-800 as John's surrogate father is such that she leaves it in control of John when she drives away to kill Dyson. Sarah's dream about the nuclear holocaust that will kill 6 billion people, including her son, incites her to kill Dyson before he can complete the work that will bring about Skynet. But when the moment comes, she is unable to fully forsake her humanity and murder him with no emotion. Cameron described this as a question of humanity's worth if we abandon it to win the battle for its existence. In contrast with the bleak, nihilistic themes of the first film, Terminator 2 emphasizes the concept of free will and the value of human life. Schwarzenegger quoted the film's line, "No fate but what we make," saying people have control over their own destinies. Terminator 2 also comments on the use of violence. On its release, reviewers were critical of Terminator 2, Judgment Day's message about preserving peace through violence. Owen Gleiberman stated that reckless indifference to human life is intrinsic to the film, but the T-800 maiming people rather than killing them potentially condemns victims of violence to a life of pain. Cameron described the film as the world's most violent anti-war movie and said it is about people struggling with their own violent natures. In particular, Cameron had been concerned by the original antagonist T-800's status as a cultural icon and power fantasy as a lethal, unstoppable force of strength and power, and chose to redefine it in Terminator 2, retaining the power fantasy without taking lives. Cinephilia said it is not morally possible to recover from killing people, so Terminator 2 is about redeeming the T-800 and Sarah. Analysis. According to Professor Jeffrey A. Brown, there was a growth of female-led action films in the wake of Aliens' success. Brown believes this reflected the increase in women assuming non-traditional roles and the division between professional critics, who perceive a masculinization of the female hero, and audiences who embrace characters regardless of gender. The hyper-masculine heroes played by Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and Jean-Claude Van Damme were replaced with independent women who are capable of defending themselves and defeating villains in films such as Terminator 2 and The Silence of the Lambs. Brown said these female characters often perform stereotypical male actions and have muscular physiques rather than feminine, soft bodies. He considers Hamilton's undershirt to be symbolic of typically male action heroes such as John McClane and John Rambo, as well as women displaying masculine traits such as Rachel McLish in Ace's Iron Eagle 3, 1992. Despite the emphasis on strong femininity, Hamilton's character remains secondary to Schwarzenegger's. Sarah's efforts to defeat the T-1000 fall short until the last-minute intervention of the T-800. Author Victoria Warren said this allows the female character to be strong enough to be admired, but not strong enough to undermine the male protagonist's masculinity. Professors Amanda Fernbach and Thomas B. Byers said the rigid form of the T-800 represents reactionary masculinity that is in direct opposition to the gender-bending T-1000, which represents a postmodern, fluid nature that is outside traditional norms and in opposition to patriarchy and the preservation of the traditional family. Author Mark Duckenfield said Terminator 2 Judgment Day can be seen as an unintended allegory for the decline of United States industries against successful Japanese technology firms, with the cutting-edge T-1000 representing Japan against the older, less advanced T-800. The U.S. industries, which were sometimes seen as villains during the economic boom of the 1980s, are seen as more sympathetic in the face of obsolescence, just as the T-800 is presented as friendlier and still powerful, but no longer overwhelmingly so. Duckenfield considers the final scene, which takes place in a steel mill, a place of American industry, symbolic. According to Warren, Terminator 2 reflects Cold War American values that emphasized principles of American culture, in particular individualism and rejection of government intervention. The institutions that the film's protagonists should be able to rely on, such as the government, the police, and technology, are the ones attempting to stop them because they do not believe in the protagonist's doomsday prophecy. Legacy. Cultural influence. Terminator 2 is considered a highly influential film, setting a benchmark for sequels, action set pieces, and visual effects. Cameron and special effects supervisor Dennis Murin said the groundbreaking special effects in Terminator 2 demonstrated the possibilities of computer-generated effects, and that without it, effects-focused films such as Jurassic Park, 1993, would not have been possible. Various publications have referenced Terminator 2's influence on special effects, describing it as the most important special effects film since Tron 1982, marking the start of the era of reliance on CGI effects for films such as Jurassic Park and The Matrix 1999. In 2007, the Visual Effects Society, an entertainment industry organization of visual effects practitioners, named Terminator 2 the 14th most influential visual effects film of all time, and the T-1000 is listed by Guinness World Records as the first major blockbuster movie character generated using computers. According to The Guardian, the film's groundbreaking effects led to CGI laziness, a reliance on computer graphics over practical effects, stunts, and craft. A 2014 Entertainment Weekly article said Terminator 2 contributed to the contemporary Hollywood high-budget science fiction epic film, and a reliance on turning films into franchises targeted at young audiences and broad demographics. Den of Geek described it as one of the most influential blockbusters since the thriller Jaws, 1975. Several filmmakers and creative leads have named it as an influence on their work, including Stephen Caple Jr., Ryan Coogler, Kevin Feige, and Hideo Kojima, and it was the favorite film of Russian political prisoner Alexei Navalny. With a $94 to $102 million budget, Terminator 2, Judgment Day, was the most expensive film made in its time, and as of 2023, it remains Schwarzenegger's highest-grossing film. Alongside her appearance in The Terminator, Hamilton's Sarah Connor became regarded as one of the greatest and most influential cinematic female action heroes, and an iconic character. Patrick's T-1000 is considered one of the most iconic cinematic villains. He made cameo appearances as the T-1000 in Wayne's World 1992 and Schwarzenegger's Last Action Hero 1993. In Last Action Hero, Stallone replaces Schwarzenegger as the T-800 on the Terminator 2 poster. The T-800's line, "Hasta la vista, baby," is considered an iconic piece of movie dialogue and is often quoted. Schwarzenegger also used it in speeches during his political career. Terminator 2 Judgment Day has been referenced in a variety of media, including television, films, and video games. The biker bar scene was recreated for a 2015 advertisement, which featured Schwarzenegger for the video game WWE 2K16. The bar patrons were replaced with WWE wrestlers. In 2023, the Library of Congress selected Terminator 2 Judgment Day for preservation in the National Film Registry as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Retrospective assessments. Since its release, Terminator 2 Judgment Day has been assessed as one of the best action science fiction and sequel films ever made. Terminator 2 and The Terminator are generally considered the standout films in the Terminator franchise, with each taking turns in the top spot. Some publications have listed Terminator 2 among the greatest films made In 2001, the American Film Institute, AFI, ranked Terminator 2 number 77 on its 100 Years, 100 Thrills list, recognizing the most heart-pounding movies, 296, and the 2003 list of the 100 best heroes and villains ranked the T-800 character as the 48th best hero. The 2005 list of the 100 best movie quotes listed the T-800 dialogue line, "Hasta la vista, baby," as the 76th best quotation, and the 2008 AFI's 10 Top 10 named Terminator 2 as the 8th best science fiction film. To mark Schwarzenegger's 75th birthday in 2022, Variety listed Terminator 2 Judgment Day as the best film in his 46-year career. Review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes offers a 91% approval rating from the aggregated reviews of 91 critics, with an average score of 8.5/10. The website's critical consensus says, T2 features thrilling action sequences and eye-popping visual effects, but what takes this sci-fi action landmark to the next level is the depth of the human and cyborg characters. The film has a score of 75 out of 100 on Metacritic, based on 22 critics' reviews, indicating generally favorable reviews. During Terminator 2's 30th anniversary in 2021, Cameron, among others, said despite using older models of cars, the film's visuals still compare well with contemporary films. Cameron also said Terminator 2 remains relevant because artificial intelligence had become a ubiquitous reality rather than a fantasy. In 2006, Terminator 2 was listed at number 32 on Film 4's 50 Films to See Before You Die list and is included in the film reference book 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. Rotten Tomatoes lists it as one of 300 essential movies and at number 123 on its list of 200 essential movies. Popular Mechanics and Rolling Stone jointly listed it alongside The Terminator as the third best time travel film ever made. Rolling Stone's reader-voted list of the best sequels ranks Terminator 2 second, behind The Godfather Part 2, 1974. And Empire readers ranked the film 17th on its 2017 100 Greatest Movies list. Sequels. Main article, Terminator franchise. Cameron said he had no intentions for further sequels, believing that Terminator 2 brings the story full circle and ends. And I think ending it at this point is a good idea. Wisher and Cameron wrote the script with the intention of leaving no option for a sequel. Even so, 4 sequels followed. Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, 2003, Terminator Salvation, 2009, Terminator Genesis, 2015, and Terminator Dark Fate, 2019. Though none replicated the success of The Terminator or Terminator 2. Schwarzenegger returned for all but Terminator Salvation, while Cameron and Hamilton returned only for Dark Fate, a direct sequel to the events of Terminator 2. Although better critically received than other post-Terminator 2 sequels, Dark Fate is also considered a failure. Analysts blamed audience disinterest on the diminishing quality of the series since Terminator 2 and repeated attempts to reboot the series. Fans also criticized Dark Fate's opening scene in which a T-800 kills Furlong's teenage John Connor. Entertainment website Collider wrote that this retroactively damages the ending of Terminator 2. A television series, Terminator, The Sarah Connor Chronicles, 2008 to 2009, also takes place after the events of Terminator 2 and ignores the events in sequels Terminator 3 and beyond. Plot: the cyborg who once tried to kill Sarah Connor is dead, and another T-800 must now protect her teenage son, John Connor, from an even more powerful and advanced Terminator, the T-1000. Review. Everyone tends to agree that Die Hard is the best action movie ever made. However, I think that it may just be beaten by T2. This is quite frankly a flawless masterpiece of action cinema. I remember seeing it 5 times when it was first released in theaters, and I had never seen anything like it. In fact, I believe I saw it before even seeing the first movie. You've got a great story, characters you care about, and great writing. A great example is Arnie being taught how to do the thumbs up earlier in the movie and then doing it again in the finale. This is a great demonstration of how the character of the Terminator has its own journey and how it now understands human behavior better. Terminator 2 is one of those few sequels that may actually be better than the classic original. Brad Fiedel's amazing industrial score provides the greatest introductory scene in cinematic history. Who will ever forget that playground on fire and the endoskeleton coming out of the flames? The music is exciting, but also somber, which really adds to the atmosphere of impending doom. The dream sequence with the nuclear explosion is still equally as haunting today as it was at the time. The visuals are absolutely amazing, and over 20 years later still stand the test of time. In terms of acting, I really have to say that Linda Hamilton doesn't get enough credit as Sarah Connor. I think her transformation from waitress in the first movie to full-on warrior woman in T2 is amazing. She's ruined by the events of a future she can't stop and is driven crazy by it. Her performance is believable, disturbing, and sympathetic. Robert Patrick pretty much steals the movie as the liquid metal T-1000 sent through time to kill John Connor. He is cold, emotionless, and utterly cool. Edward Furlong plays Connor as a smart-ass teen, and he has one scene which always bothered me, the scene where he finds out that the Terminator will do whatever he asks and then gets him to beat up the two guys who come over to help him. That always leaves a bad taste. I mean, they were there to help him. Little prick, I guess it was to show how immature he was and that he had a long way to go before becoming this great military leader. That's the only flaw, really. The movie is the reason why I fell in love with film in the first place, and I believe it was the first R-rated movie I saw in the cinema. When you go back and watch Terminator 3 and Salvation, although not bad films, they really are unnecessary. To me, Terminator 2 is a perfect film. So what was the point in trying to do better? Overall, it really is one of the greatest films of all time and will always be Arnie's finest hour. In Terminator 2 Judgment Day, the future once again comes hunting to kill John Connor. Though the world after the nuclear holocaust of 1997 is ruled by machines, a single man can still make a difference. And that man is Connor, who is a youngster as the movie opens, but is destined to grow up into the leader of the human resistance movement against the cyborgs. You will recall from the original The Terminator, 1984, or perhaps you will not, that the first Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, was sent back from the future to kill Connor's mother, Linda Hamilton. That mission failed, and the young man was born. And so now, in Terminator 2, two Terminators journey back from the future. A good one, played by Schwarzenegger, who is assigned to protect young Connor, and a bad one, played by Robert Patrick, whose mission is to destroy him. Terminators, by the way, look like humans but are made of high-tech materials and have computer brains. The bad one, named T-1000, was apparently named after his great-grandfather, a Toshiba laptop. You'd think those machines of the future would realize that their mission is futile, that because Connor is manifestly the leader of the human resistance, their mission to kill him obviously must fail. But such paradoxes are ignored by Terminator 2, which overlooks an even larger one. If indeed in the last scene of the film, the computer chips necessary to invent Terminators are all destroyed, then there couldn't have been any Terminators. So how come they exist in the first place? Science fiction has had fun toying with such paradoxes for generations, but Terminator 2 takes the prudent course of simply ignoring them and centering its action in the present. Where young John Connor, Eddie Furlong, is a wild street kid being raised in a foster home because his birth mother, Hamilton, is a prisoner in a mental hospital. They think she's crazy, of course, because she keeps trying to warn mankind about the approaching nuclear disaster. From the opening chase scene, in which young Connor on a fast motorcycle outruns T-1000 at the wheel of a semi, Terminator 2 develops a close relationship between the young boy and the good Terminator. Before long, young Connor even discovers that Schwarzenegger is programmed to follow his instructions, and so he orders the awesome machine to stop killing people. The result is a neat twist on the tradition of the Schwarzenegger special effects film. This time, instead of corpses littering the screen, the Arnold character shoots to maim or frighten. It's fun for a kid, having his own pet Terminator, And that's one of the inspirations in the screenplay by director James Cameron and William Wisher. Schwarzenegger becomes a father figure for young Connor, who has never met his own father because, as nearly as I can recall, his own father came from the future. Another intriguing screenplay idea is to develop the Terminator's lack of emotions. Like Mr. Spock in Star Trek, he does not understand why humans cry. Schwarzenegger's genius as a movie star is to find roles that build on, rather than undermine, his physical and vocal characteristics. Here he becomes the straight man in a human drama, and in a human comedy too, as the kid tells him to lighten up and stop talking like a computer. After the kid's mother is freed from the mental home, the threesome work together to defeat T-1000, while at the same time creating an unlikely but effective family unit. While that's happening on the story level, the movie surpasses itself with special effects. There are the usual car chases, explosions, and fight scenes, of course, all well done, but what people will remember is the way the movie envisions T-1000. This cyborg is made out of a newly invented liquid metal that makes him all but invincible. Shoot a hole in him, and you can see right through him, but the sides of the hole run together again, and he's repaired and ready for action. These scenes involve ingenious creative work by Industrial Light and Magic, the George Lucas special effects shop. The basic idea for T-1000 was first tried out by ILM in Abyss, 1990, in which an undersea station was invaded by a creature with a body made entirely of water. The trick is to create a computer simulation of the movement desired, and then use a computer paintbox program to give it surface color and texture. In this case, the appearance of liquid mercury. The computer images are then combined with the live action. T-1000 turns from shiny liquid into a human being through a dissolve from the effect to the actor. All of that work would simply be an exercise if the character itself were not effective, but T-1000, as played by Patrick, is a splendid villain, with compact good looks and a bland expression. His most fearsome quality is his implacability. No matter what you do to him, he doesn't get disturbed and he doesn't get discouraged. He just pulls himself together and keeps on coming. The key element in any action picture, I think, is a good villain. Terminator 2 has one, along with an intriguing hero and fierce heroine, and a young boy who is played by Furlong with guts and energy. The movie responds to criticisms of excessive movie violence by tempering the Terminator's bloodlust, but nobody, I think, will complain that it doesn't have enough action. 3D isn't finished yet. James Cameron has supervised a new version of his smash hit 1991 sequel, Terminator 2: Judgment Day, and watching in immersive 3D is a possible new way of getting excited about the technical effects that were state-of-the-art at the time. The situation is one narrative step forward from where we left the first movie. John Connor, Edward Furlong, is a kid, but he is destined to be the grown-up leader of the resistance to the machine's post-nuclear tyranny. As with all time travel movies, you have to disregard the breakdown in logic. If we know he grows up, then how can any plan to kill him work? Linda Hamilton plays his mother, Sarah Connor, a name that no one can see in print without hearing it in Arnie's thick Austrian-American accent, who is confined to a psychiatric hospital because no one believes what she has to say about humanity's future. Two cyborgs are sent from the future. The bad T-1000 cyborg with the Quicksilver power to change shape intends to kill John, and is played with a directional ferocity by Robert Patrick. And now Arnold plays a good cyborg, sent by the Resistance to protect John. It is a really exciting, well-made sci-fi picture, but I can't help feeling that this is one of the least needed sequels and franchises in movie history. The first Terminator was such a classic. Its ending so disturbing, so magnificent, so nightmarish and definitive. Bringing back Arnie, and as a good guy, is sort of beside the point, but T2 is still a very stylish film. Considering the struggles the franchise has faced since 1991, Terminator 2: Judgment Day might just be the most impressive sequel in movie history. Where subsequent Terminator movies messed up timelines, killed off iconic characters, and spectacularly frittered away the series' once mighty reputation, James Cameron's original follow-up is a masterpiece in successful storytelling and lore expansion. Forget failed reboots and gaping plot holes. This is everything that a Terminator could and should be. Following in the footsteps of the surprisingly successful 1984 original, Terminator 2 massively expands the first film's now familiar blueprint. Where the Terminator revolved around a singular killing machine sent back through time to destroy the future leader of human resistance before he could be conceived, the 1991 movie ingeniously raises the stakes. In what initially seems like a reprisal of his role, Arnold Schwarzenegger stars as the T-800 Terminator, a cybernetic organism reprogrammed by John Connor and sent back through time to protect his 10-year-old self. Opposite Schwarzenegger is Robert Patrick's T-1000, a highly advanced antagonist determined to eradicate John. Rounding out the cast is Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, transformed from her passive role in the original movie into a ferocious she-wolf, determined to prepare John for the fight to come and reshape humanity's bleak future. And Edward Furlong as the young John Connor, a rebellious tearaway who refuses to accept his destiny while yearning for a simpler life and a male presence he can rely on. These four central players collide in one of the most spectacular and daring combinations of filmmaking flair, narrative genius, and explosive action that science fiction has ever seen. Even though Terminator 2 is a sequel, it shouldn't be measured against the same criteria as Cameron's original movie. Where the Terminator was a low-budget and ultra-violent chiller, incorporating horror elements alongside sci-fi action, Terminator 2 is, first and foremost, a bona fide blockbuster. With a budget of between $94 to $102 million, compared to the first film's paltry $6.4 million, Terminator 2 was always going to up the ante when it came to special effects, action, and story. The results remain impressive to this day. The film features some of the most hair-raising practical stunt work ever committed to screen. The famous chase following John's first escape from the T-1000 is still just as nail-biting as it was 33 years ago, as is the semi-climactic helicopter sequence along the freeway. Equally impressive is Patrick's oozing antagonist. While CGI may have come a long way since 1991, Terminator 2's once groundbreaking effects still hold up surprisingly well. Every one of the movie's many set pieces crackles with energy under Cameron's expert direction, keeping us glued to our seats. Besides the plentiful explosions, Terminator 2 also offers surprising emotional nuance. For starters, it's much funnier than the original movie, with John's frustrated efforts to humanize his machine protector inevitably leading to some hilarious misunderstandings. Beyond this, the story also delivers some genuinely affecting moments. John's realization that his newfound father figure must sacrifice himself in the movie's climax is poignant and heartbreaking, while Linda Hamilton's tortured performance as the psychologically damaged Sarah is the film's beating heart. All in all, Terminator 2 is a superlative achievement on both a psychological and visual level. There's no denying that Terminator 2 deserves its place among the all-time great sci-fi movies. Its legacy can still be felt to this day, and its financial success is the main reason why filmmakers determinedly reanimate the Terminator franchise's corpse every few years, with admittedly diminishing returns. However, despite being a cultural icon, the film is not without its flaws. Part of the problem is that, by transforming into a polished popcorn actioner, Terminator 2 loses some of what made the first film so daring. There is none of the grit that makes the Terminator so raw and remarkable. Instead, like Patrick's villain, the movie is slick, seamless, and polished. This isn't necessarily a problem, but it does feel more corporatized than Cameron's rough-and-ready original entry. In a franchise that's ostensibly about a guerrilla campaign to preserve humanity, making things so epic is slightly at odds with the plucky underdog message. A second issue is the somewhat disjointed story. At its core, The Terminator is a chase movie, with its clear morality giving the whole narrative an elegance, enhanced by intellectual sci-fi trappings. Terminator 2 pivots from a similar search and rescue plot to a mission to reshape the entirety of human history, a change that can make some of the sequences feel slightly disjointed. It would be wrong to say these are major issues. If anything, Cameron's bold decision to progress the story beyond what worked before should be applauded. Nevertheless, the film arguably loses something of the original's brutal efficiency. At the end of the day, these are minor quibbles. Terminator 2 is a landmark achievement in sci-fi cinema, proving that inventive storytelling and challenging ideas don't have to come at the expense of entertainment. However, given how far the franchise has fallen, it's obvious in hindsight that some of the seeds of Terminator's demise were sown in the 1991 classic. Terminator 2: Judgment Day should be enjoyed and acclaimed. But given how it began the trend of moving away from the original 1984 hit, it's important to recognize that it isn't perfect. When it debuted in 1991, Terminator 2: Judgment Day blew the collective minds of action movie junkies and, well, everyone who enjoys movies. What size this production has, what innovation, and what crowd-pleasing excitement. Marked by its breakthrough special effects, an unending series of bravura action sequences, and clever narrative inversion of the 1984 original, the production sells itself. Arnold Schwarzenegger, then at the height of his popularity, plays the good guy this time around, protecting the future's rebel leader John Connor, played by newcomer Edward Furlong. Linda Hamilton committed to her transformation into a ferocious survivalist and earned Oscar buzz for her performance. The new CGI technology renders an iconic movie villain, played by Robert Patrick, composed of liquid metal. And director James Cameron in his prime after Aliens, 1986, and The Abyss, 1989, takes the scope far beyond what he achieved in the first, offering unexpected emotional value on top of his breakneck spectacle. T2 was the most expensive film ever made then, and it outperformed all box office projections. This would be a trend for Cameron, which he would repeat with Titanic, 1997, and his Avatar films. In its day, there was hardly a film more talked about or at the forefront of the zeitgeist than T2, and it would change the way blockbusters were made for the foreseeable future. And yet, despite its many technical advancements, grosses upwards of $500 million and lasting impact on the industry, T2 remains Cameron's clunkiest script. On the level of pure pulse-pounding momentum, one cannot deny the film's power. But the sequel lacks the edge of the Terminator, and amid its inconsistent narration and kid-friendly appeal, it feels compromised. Indeed, Cameron made consolations for T2. An audience of young viewers had seen the Terminator on cable television and VHS, and when social critics decried the film's violence and Schwarzenegger's popularity in the youth culture of the 1980s, Cameron responded by softening the sequel. While still rated R, the T-800 does not terminate, it protects. I think of it as a violent movie about peace, Cameron told Newsweek. Worse, Cameron's desire to appeal to young people with his message leaves T2 marked by dreadful early 1990s signifiers that feel painfully forced upon revisitation. Consider the Bart Simpson-like phrases of the young John Connor, such as "no problemo" and "hasta la vista, baby," which serve as the film's comic relief and way of appealing to youngsters, or the nonsensical humor, "I need a vacation," the T-800 quips. More inspired is Cameron's ingenious idea to make the T-1000 look like an LA cop, a prescient choice after the world was rocked by footage of Rodney King's beating by the LAPD a few months before the sequel's release in July 1991. After The Terminator debuted to unexpected box office success, Schwarzenegger pushed Cameron to make a sequel, but rights disputes with the original producers at Hemdale Film Corporation and Cameron's lack of interest stalled a follow-up. Mario Casar's Carolco Pictures, which had released Schwarzenegger's starrer Total Recall in 1990, wanted to make the sequel, and Schwarzenegger convinced Casar to buy the rights no matter the cost. After Casar's $10 million purchase, he had to convince Cameron to make a sequel. Cameron wasn't interested until Casar offered him a $6 million payday. Suitably motivated, Cameron and William Wisher began writing and completed their draft in May 1990. Cameron drew from an early version of the original 1984 screenplay, which contained a liquid metal Terminator, an idea Cameron scrapped because special effects technology could not adequately represent the character. But after using CGI to depict water-based formations in the abyss, Cameron's liquid metal idea now seemed possible. With a massive $70 million budget that eventually ballooned to $100 million, the original's cost was just over $6 million. The production began shooting the following October. It lasted until March of 1991, with much time spent on its Oscar-winning special effects and CGI implementation. The film would make $204 million at the U.S. box office alone, becoming the year's top earner. It was an unprecedented success on home video as well, and developed an instant legacy for its epic action sequences. Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Still, Cameron's initial disinterest in the production and payday mindset upon accepting the job comes through in what might be his most by-the-numbers script. In story structure terms, the basic outline follows its predecessor almost exactly. If it had been released today, Terminator 2: Judgment Day might even be called a reboot of the franchise, aside from its numeric title. Just as Cameron repeated several elements from Ridley Scott's Alien, 1979, while also deepening the mythology in his sequel Aliens, the director duplicated several themes from the Terminator and expanded on them by adding layers to his basic outline, resulting in its case of sequelitis. Consider the parallels between the two films. In each, two time travelers, one bad and the other good, return to fight over John Connor's eventual rebellion against the supercomputer Skynet. Someone is deemed crazy by the same psychologist, the snide Dr. Silberman, played by Earl Boen, for their belief in Judgment Day. The Terminator says, "I'll be back," almost as if delivering the line exclusively to gratify the viewer. And then, in the industrial plant finale, all evidence of time-traveling robots is disposed of, quite conveniently. Despite these parallels to the Terminator, the story is tweaked just enough in T2 to keep it interesting, with the similarities written off as dramatic irony. These moments wink at the audience. So too do the sequel's more nonsensical callbacks to the original. Early on, when the T-800 takes sunglasses from a Hells Angels biker, it's only so Schwarzenegger can replicate the Terminator's look from the first film for the viewer's delight, a look the character adopted to conceal its damaged eye. Here, the choice has no purpose except to appease the audience. The sequel opens with rebellious 10-year-old John Connor, whose biological mother Sarah is now locked up in a mental institution, raving about Judgment Day, supposedly coming in 1997, when the artificially intelligent defense system, Skynet, wipes out most of humanity by launching a nuclear attack. A liquid metal-based Terminator dubbed T-1000, which can morph its body into blades and change its appearance at will, sets out to kill John, the eventual resistance leader, against Skynet's army of machines. In a role reversal, the film places the now archaic T-800 in the hero role to protect John from the T-1000. John learns that the Terminator must obey his orders, and he has some fun with that. Then, together, they break Sarah out of the asylum. Once they regroup and arm themselves, they resolve to stop Skynet at the source, enlisting Cyberdyne Systems engineer Miles Dyson, Joe Morton, exuding humanity in his few brief scenes, to help them stop Skynet before his company builds it. During the raid, the T-1000 shows up, and a chase ensues. Meanwhile, the Terminator becomes John's father figure and friend, leading to a sad end, when after disposing of the T-1000 in a metal works, the heroic cyborg asks Sarah to lower it into the vat of molten steel, removing all evidence of Terminators from the timeline. While one could discuss the story more thoroughly, it's best not to look too closely. This yarn unravels upon close inspection, beginning with another temporal paradox at the center. The Terminator introduced a temporal paradox by suggesting that Sarah's protector, Kyle Reese, Michael Biehn, traveled back in time to father John. In T2, without the Terminator from the first film going back in time and leaving a robotic arm and computer chip behind, Cyberdyne would have never developed the microprocessor necessary to create Skynet. To recap linear temporal theory, time is sequential and moves in a forward line until altered by time travel, so Dyson would have had to invent Skynet without the benefit of Terminator leftovers initially. So the question is a familiar one. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Therein resides the temporal paradox of this series and the unsatisfying way Cameron explores it. But why bother complaining about holes or vaguely explored notions in Cameron's application of science fiction? Cameron is more concerned about the wowing sequences than his characters, and he establishes their motivations just enough to justify the action. Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Still away, we go from the moment the Terminator rescues John at a mall through a series of massive multi-vehicle chases involving dirt bikes, semi-trucks, tanker trucks, motorcycles, helicopters, and everything in between. Cameron has always excelled at building momentum and not slowing down until the end credits. His showmanship is legendary, his capacity for orchestrating mayhem unparalleled. And Terminator 2: Judgment Day is a prime example. His plotting thrusts the action into motion, and before the viewer knows how much time has passed, the film is over. Quite a feat, considering its 2.5-hour runtime. However, Cameron owes a large debt of gratitude to George Miller's The Road Warrior, 1981, for this sequel, as several car chase sequences seem directly inspired by those in Miller's film. For example, Cameron borrows the notion of one last bullet tumbling onto a moving car, and someone having to climb out to get it, from Miller's sequel. Though along the way, there's far less death than in the original, as John teaches the Terminator that mindless killing is wrong. As a result, several police officers receive bullets in their kneecaps instead of in the head. Other reprieves from the action arrive in tender moments between characters, with many reinserted into the extended special edition of the film, released on various home video formats. For instance, the T-800 only learns because John and his mother operate on the cyborg's head to alter its CPU neural net processor, a scene cut from the theatrical version. This detail better establishes the Terminator's curiosity and capacity to learn from John for the Tin Man to develop a heart. The special edition also better shows Dyson as a family man. The 15 minutes of additional footage includes scenes of comic relief when John attempts to teach the T-800 to smile, resulting in a goofy bit of physical comedy from Schwarzenegger. Elsewhere, Sarah dreams of Reese while in the asylum, where he appears and urges her to protect John, reminding her that the future remains open with the speech John made him memorize. There is no fate, but what we make for ourselves. These moments feel essential to the story structure and humanity of the characters, and they generally improve upon the theatrical version. Looking back, the sequel boasts a career-best performance for Hamilton, who agreed to return on the condition that Cameron make her crazy. The performer drew from her own experiences with mental illness and manic depression to give Sarah her unbalanced edge. She trained with ex-Israeli commando Uzi Gal for a year to achieve the physicality and weaponry know-how for her fiery performance. But it's also a rather tragic turn. When finally faced with stopping Judgment Day by killing Dyson, she cannot go through with it despite her haunting dreams of a bleak future she has never seen. And about those dreams, these are strange details since Sarah has only been told about Judgment Day during her brief time with Reese. Her imagination, coupled with a mental breakdown, seems to have filled in the blanks quite vividly. Regardless, Hamilton goes beyond the limitations of her waitress-turned-warrior role from the original, and her best scenes occur in the asylum, where she clashes with the predatory staff and mounts an escape attempt before her son and his new guardian rescue her. However, Sarah's voiceover is a clunky device, conveying her fear of Judgment Day, her apprehension toward the Terminator's relationship with John, and in the end, her optimism for an uncertain future. But structurally, it's odd to have Sarah narrate the story since the narrative and filmmaking generally follow John's point of view for most of the movie, whereas Sarah's presence feels tertiary. Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Still, the real protagonist of T2 is John Connor, at least for the first two-thirds, and casting him was arguably the biggest risk of the production. Furlong, a streetwise kid the casting director found at a Boys and Girls Club in Pasadena, had the naturalism and attitude required for the part. His father was unknown, and his mother was gone. An uncle raised him. With plenty of real-life parallels, Furlong does well in the role, though Cameron's dialogue for John and understanding of children leaves much to be desired. But it's the relationship between the boy and the cyborg that Cameron sought to get right. modeled after similar dynamics in Shane, 1953, and Old Yeller, 1957, where the boy forms a companionship before eventually losing said companion. Cameron wanted to bring the audience to tears over the loss of what was previously a killing machine, but he doesn't quite hit the mark. When the T-800 remarks, "I know now why you cry," before getting lowered into molten steel amid John's protests, only to flash a thumbs up, the response isn't tears, but cringe. Whereas Cameron often achieves a pitch-perfect balance of sentimentality and action, evidenced in Aliens, The Abyss, and Titanic, T2 falters in its earnest ambitions. While many scenes from the sequel would become ingrained into 1990s pop culture, T2 is most remembered for how its Oscar-winning special effects changed Hollywood. Earlier examples of shape-shifting in Willow, 1988, and liquid formations in The Abyss were mere testing grounds for how Industrial Light and Magic animated one of cinema's most memorable movie villains, aided by Patrick's sharp, intentional performance. ILM's Dennis Muren spent about the budget of the Terminator to accomplish the CGI in T2, though it amounts to just 5 minutes of footage. Even so, what's most impressive about the production is how many practical, old-school effects Stan Winston's studio used. Most of its car chases, motorcycle stunts, and explosions would be entirely CGI today, as would the bullet holes and other damage inflicted on the T-1000. But the blend of CGI and practical effects demonstrated here, and further perfected in Jurassic Park in 1993, render a more convincing visual experience than today's default mode of over-reliance on CGI. Apart from a moment or two, the T-1000 somersault roll out of a tanker truck, for instance, the sequel still looks incredible. Considering the director's stated ambitions for Terminator 2 Judgment Day, if Cameron hoped to instill a theme about the necessity for peace, the theme doesn't register. When violence looks this good, this groundbreaking, this thrilling, it's difficult to ignore the adrenaline rush and extract a lesson about the necessity for peace. But, similar to its predecessor, Cameron implants a warning about the dangers of technology and artificial intelligence. References to Skynet have become shorthand for the threat of AI gaining sentience and attacking humanity, but that hasn't stopped computer scientists from developing similar technology. Whatever its intended lessons, it's best to think of Terminator 2 Judgment Day as an engaging, impressive action movie laden with moments of melodrama and schmaltz. The unmeasurable amount of mayhem on screen remains impressive, leaving its ideas to be an afterthought. But it's more significant for other reasons, such as its technical advancements in filmmaking, its continued waves in the culture, and Cameron's ability to conceive and execute amazing action sequences. The theatrical version was released on DVD in 1997 and 2000, and Ultimate Edition DVD was released containing the theatrical and special edition cuts and a new extended cut containing a scene of the T-1000 inspecting John's bedroom and the alternate ending. Terminator 2 special effects coordinator Van Ling supervised the release. The Extreme Edition was released in 2003, featuring the theatrical and special edition cuts, a remastered 1080p image. Cameron's first commentary in a documentary about the year. Film's influence on special effects. Terminator 2 was released on Blu-ray in 26, followed in 2009 by a Skynet edition that contains the theatrical and special edition cuts and commentaries with the cast and crew. This release includes a limited collector's set containing the Blu-ray, the Ultimate and Extreme editions on DVDs, a digital download version, all-extent special features, and a 14-in 360mm T-800 skull bust, a 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray version that includes a standard Blu-ray and digital version was released in 2017. This release also offered a collector's option that includes one of 6,000 life-size replicas of a T-800 skeleton forearm, each signed by Cameron, and individually numbered the soundtrack. The theatrical special extended in 2017, 3D remaster cuts and reprogramming the Terminator, a documentary that includes interviews with Schwarzenegger, Cameron Furlong, and other media. Terminator 2 Judgment Day was marketed with numerous and products including toys, puppets, trading cards, jigsaw puzzles, clothing, a perfume named Hero, and a novelization by Randall Frakes that expands on the film's ending, F, in 1991. Marvel Comics adapted the film into a comic book, which was followed by expansions of the Terminator 2 narrative, including Malibu Comics' Cybernetic Dawn and Nuclear Twilight, 1995-1996, Dynamite Entertainment's Infinity and Revolution, 2007, and the T2 novel series by S.M. Sterling in the early 2000s. Several video game adaptations of Terminator 2 were published, including a pinball machine and an arcade game in 1991. The arcade game was popular enough to be ported to home consoles as T2, the arcade game multiple studios developed, widely differing adaptations for home consoles, including Terminator 2 for Game Boy and Terminator 2 for the Nintendo Entertainment System. Next, a later adaptation was developed for the Sega, Genesis, and Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and a different game was published for home computers merchandise. For Terminator 2, Judgment Day was estimated to have generated $1,400 million in sales in 1996, T2 3D Battle. Across time, a live-action attraction was opened at Universal Studios Florida and later at locations in Hollywood and Japan. The 20-minute attraction action was co-written and directed by Cameron and cost $160 million to produce, including live-action stunts and a $124 million 12-minute 3D film starring Schwarzenegger, Hamilton, Patrick, and Furlong as their in-world characters, making it the most expensive film per minute produced of its time. In it, Sarah and JN attempt to stop Cyberdyne, which has developed Skynet. They are confronted by the T-1000, but saved by the T-800, which returns to 2029 with JN to defeat Skynet. And its latest creation, the T-1 3D remaster. Cameron oversaw a year-long their 3D remaster and subsequent theatrical re-release of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. In August 2017, Cameron said, "If you've never seen it, this will be the version you want to see." And remember, Cameron made visual modifications to the film to fix errors that had bothered him, including the addition of windshield glass to the T-100's truck, which fell out during its stunt fall and reappears in later scenes, concealing the obvious use of stuntman. For Furlong and Schwarzenegger during the same scene concealed more of Patrick's nudity during his introduction and brightened the visuals. The 3D remaster's theatrical release was seen as a disappointment, earning about $562,000 in its debut across 386 theaters compared to the $3 re-release of Cameron's Titanic in 2012, which fetched $17 million. Terminator 2 Judgment Day movie review. In Terminator 2 Judgment Day, the future once again comes hunting to kill John Connor, though the world after the nuclear holocaust of 1997 is ruled by machines. A single man can still make a difference, and that man is Connor, who is a youngster as the movie opens, but is destined to grow up into the leader of the human resistance movement against the cyborgs. You will recall from the original, The Terminator, 1984. Or perhaps you will not that the first Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, was sent back from the future to kill Connor's mother, Linda Hamilton. That mission failed, and the young man was born. And so now in Terminator 2, Two Terminators Journey, Back from the Future, a good one, played by Schwarzenegger, who is assigned to protect young Connor, and a bad one, played by Robert Patrick, whose mission is to destroy him. Terminators, by the way, look like humans, but are made of high-tech materials and have computer brains. The bad one, named T-1000, was apparently named after his great-grandfather, a Toshiba laptop. You'd think those machines of the future would realize that their mission is futile, that because Connor is manifestly the leader of the human resistance, their mission to kill him obviously must fail. But such paradoxes are ignored by Terminator 2, which overlooks an even larger one. If, indeed, in the last scene of the film, the computer chips necessary to invent Terminators are all destroyed, then there couldn't have been any Terminators. So how come they exist in the first place? Science fiction has had fun toying with such paradoxes for generations, but Terminator 2 takes the prudent course of simply ignoring them and centering its action in the present, where young John Connor Eddie Furlong is a wild street kid being raised in a foster home because his birth mother Hamilton is a prisoner in a mental hospital. They think she's crazy, of course, because she keeps trying to warn mankind about the approaching nuclear disaster from the opening chase scene in which young Connor on a fast motorcycle outruns T-1000 at the wheel of a semi-Terminator 2, develops a close relationship between the young boy and the good Terminator. Before long, young Connor even discovers that Schwarzenegger is programmed to follow his instructions, and so he orders the awesome machine to stop killing people. The result is a neat twist on the tradition of the Schwarzenegger special effects film. This time, instead of corpses littering the screen, the Arnold character shoots to M or frighten. It's fun for a kid having his own pet Terminator, and that's one of the inspirations in the screenplay by director James Cameron, and William Wisher Schwarzenegger becomes a father figure for young Connor, who has never met his own father because, as nearly as I can recall, his own father came from the future. Another intriguing screenplay idea is to develop the Terminator's lack of emotions like Mr. Spock in Star Trek. He does not understand why humans cry Schwarzenegger's genius as a movie star. Is to find roles that build on rather than undermine his physical and vocal characteristics here. He becomes the straight man in a human drama and in a human comedy too, as the kid tells him to lighten up and stop talking like a computer. After the kid's mother is freed from the mental home, the threesome work together to defeat T-1000, while at the same time creating an unlikely but effective family unit. While that's happening, on the story level, the movie surpasses itself with special effects. There are the usual car chases, explosions, and fights, and of course all well done. But what people will remember is the way the movie envisions T-1000. This cyborg is made out of a newly invented liquid metal that makes him all but invincible. Shoot a hole in him, and you can see right through him. But the sides of the hole run together again, and he's repaired and ready for action. These scenes involve ingenious creative work by Industrial Light and Magic, the George Lucas Special Effects Shop. The basic idea for T-1000 was first tried out by Ilm in Abyss 1990, in which an undersea station was invaded by a creature with a body made entirely of water. The trick is to create a computer simulation of the movement desired, and then use a computer paintbox program to give it surface color and texture. In this case, the appearance of liquid mercury. The computer images are then combined with a live-action T-1000 turns from shiny liquid into a human being through a dissolve from the effect to the actor. All of that work would simply be an exercise if the character itself were not effective, but T-1000 is played by Patrick is a splendid villain with compact good looks and a bland expression. His most fearsome quality is his implacability. No matter what you do to him, he doesn't get disturbed and he doesn't get discouraged. He just pulls himself together and keeps on coming. The key element in any action picture, I think, is a good villain. Terminator 2 has one, along with an intriguing hero and fierce heroine and a young boy who is played by Furlong with guts and energy. The movie responds to criticisms of excessive movie violence by tempering the Terminator's bloodlust. But nobody, I think, will complain that it doesn't have enough action. This film, directed by James Cameron, written by James Cameron, William Wisher, produced by James Cameron, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, Robert Patrick. Cinematography: Adam Greenberg, edited by Conrad Buff, Mark Goldblatt, Richard A. Harris. Music by Brad Fiedel. Production companies: Coco Pictures, Pacific Western Productions, Lightstorm Entertainment, the studio Canal Plus. Distributed by TriStar Pictures. Release dates: July 1st, 1991 in Century City, July 3. 1991 in United States, running time 137 minutes, country United States, language English, budget 9,412 million, box office 1,519.29 million. So guys, this is the review of Terminator 2 Judgment Day movie and some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting. And if you like this video, please and share. Thanks for watching.